What is going on, Don't Unfriend Me Nation? Welcome to the Don't Unfriend Me show. Yes, I have a makeshift desk outside. Why? Well, it's beautiful, beautiful day. It's a little chilly. I'm not gonna lie. It's like 48, and I'm in shorts and a dry fit. So yeah, I'm a little chilly. I'm not gonna cry though. I'm not gonna complain. Why are we doing this outside? Well, because the office is stuffy, and I figured it was a good idea. Now, I'm going to be transparent. When I do my shows, I usually have a teleprompter, and I write and take copious amounts of notes and put it into a story. And here, I felt it would be better just to kind of ad-lib, but also have notes, because the numbers are important here. And I'm going to try to bring a perspective that just doesn't necessarily pump up Republicans, but also gives Democrats credits, because I think this topic is probably one of the most passionate when it comes to me when it comes to politics and my thought process in regards to a demographic of people that should be taken care of, which are veterans. And there was a gentleman who is named Brooklyn Dad on Twitter, and a lot of other Democrat paid for DNC shills on Twitter are saying, well, the Republicans want to cut VA funding, and that's not what's happening. And this is the problem with Democrats, Republicans, and the talking points, is the story never gets out and the truth doesn't necessarily get out. And it seems that smaller time podcasts like myself, or news channels that people don't necessarily spend a lot of time listening to, have the real answer, but it doesn't get out there and it doesn't permeate the bubble, so to speak. The post that's going on right now is from Brooklyn Dad, who, I don't know if this is the most important thing, but credibility is important to me. We've all made mistakes. We've all done things wrong. But this guy is a former crackhead and sold his children's toys in order to pay for crack, and allegedly. This is all over the internet. And I honestly don't think that really matters. And I've done things in my life that I'm not proud of. Other people have done things that they're not proud of. But credibility is important. And if you don't have a level of unbiasedness and focused on, not necessarily finding the easy way out in life, I don't know if you're the person I'm going to listen to. And the second thing, the reason I bring this up is because his post starts off, if I were a veteran. Well, you're not. So everything you say posthumously from those 5 words is essentially nonsense. Nobody should listen to it. You're not a veteran. So it doesn't mean that you can't have an opinion. It doesn't mean that you can't have feelings. But when it comes from experiential learning, you have no idea what you're talking about. And then we know this because what remains on his post says the following. I saw the GOP budget cuts for veterans, and I would never vote Republican ever again. Well, you never voted for Republican. You've been a Democrat shill your whole career. And he says 22% cuts to the VA budget. That's not true. Housing cuts to 50,000 veterans. That's not true. Because here's the thing. The moment that he says 22% cuts to the budget, well, that's a lie. So all these other stats are also a lie. It's not that they want to cut the budget. It's that they don't want to increase the budget anymore, and there's reasons why. We will go into that in a second. Housing cuts to 50,000 veterans. It's not a cut. If you don't increase the budget, 50,000 veterans in the future won't have housing. No, that's not the way it works, because veteran housing is cyclical. If you're in the military on active duty, you have a choice. You can actually stay on base for free, or you can get housing off base if you qualify to do so. Officers get a certain per diem or a stipend, and so do enlisted people, especially if the base is overblown with people. So therefore, if the base is too packed and there's not enough housing, you will get paid for off-base housing. Not too hard to understand. Cuts to food assistance for vets? No. Once again, this is a budget increase proposal, so nobody's getting cut anything. No more job training for unhoused veterans. So this whole post is not accurate from start to finish. His last comment, they put their lives on the line for America, and this is how the GOP treats them. Disgraceful. Pass it on. I want to be clear. Donald Trump and Joe Biden have done things for veterans. Not going to lie about that. I'm going to list what they are. And I'm going to give you what Joe Biden has done and what Donald Trump has done. Now, Donald Trump did more for veterans than any modern day president. We can go all the way back to Truman. So it's going to be hard to compare Joe Biden's record. However, I'm going to give Joe Biden his accolades because that's important. But first, let's talk about this 22% reduction in the veteran bill proposal for 2023 when it comes to spending. The lawmakers are concerned for a few reasons, and these are predominantly Republican lawmakers, because they're trying to find out why is there a need for another boost after receiving $36 billion in pandemic funding and emergency funding. The VA received a $36 billion COVID funding, and they want to know where the hell the money is. The VA is the second largest federal agency in the United States, and its annualized budget is $240 billion. Let me say that again, $240 billion, second to defense spending. They provide health care to 9 million patients. They administer the GI Bill, which I've taken advantage of, and the popular home loan program for veterans, which I've also taken advantage of. The department budget increased by 12% between 20 and 21. Those were pushed through by Donald Trump, with most spending attributed to the aging population of veterans from the 20th century wars and the influx of a new generation of post-9/11 veterans. We understand this. When you have constant wars, whether they be proxy or in country like Afghanistan or Iraq, you're going to have more injury, more issues coming back on the home front. So, of course, expanding the budget for that is anticipated. Donald Trump did this by over $40 billion. He increased the veterans' overall annual budget, the VA administration's annual budget, by $40 billion, which brought them to this $240 billion number. When you look at the $17 billion and $19.6 billion from 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act, and the 2020 Coronavirus Relief and Economic Security Act, respectively, for vaccination efforts and tackling homelessness and suicide issues in the veteran community, it was the single largest increase in budget ever in any federal agency's history. The Biden administration is asking now for an additional $8.5 billion and 8.2% boost to the funded VA, taking the annual budget to $250 billion. It'll be the largest in its history. Republican lawmakers penned a letter to the House Budget Committee expressing worry over the current rate of funding boosts that could double the budget by 2030, reaching $500 billion. That's $500 billion by 2030, despite only a marginal increase of 2.2% in VA recipients. So the question is, when you have a Republican Party whose primary focus is to limit the amount of spending and limit the size of government, why would you be surprised when they propose just that? The answer is, and the question, I guess, really is what's the funding for? Where does it go? The elephant in the room for the VA's budget is really, though, toxic exposure. We saw this with Jon Stewart. Now, Jon Stewart, in my opinion, I'm not a fan of Jon Stewart's politics. I think he's a condescending kind of an ass, and he hides behind that I'm a comedian. But he has done some really good things when it comes to veterans, especially burn pit exposure and getting those veterans funding. Now, the problem is that Jon Stewart kind of muscled his way through this, and there were a lot of proposals inside the bill that allowed reappropriation of funds from one fund to another, which would limit the amount of oversight on Democratic spending, including in the burn pit bill. Now, Republicans said, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want you robbing Peter to pay Paul, taking money from veterans, and then have it be unaccounted for. We have enough of that. We have enough frivolous spending. We have enough, shrinkage versus swell in the government's overall budget. Now, Jon Stewart doesn't care about that, and either do I really, because that is for the oversight to take care of, and veterans should get their funding, but Republicans did not want to die on that hill. They looked horrible. They looked like asses because of this, because when you are coming on the other side of veterans versus government bureaucracy, bureaucracy is going to lose that argument. Nobody wants to hear it. They want veterans taken care of, and it makes sense. So you got to give Jon Stewart some props for doing that, no matter what you think of his politics. The lobbying against any major initiative can be a political minefield, like I said, when it comes to Republicans and Democrats, and nobody wants to be on the bad side of veterans' policies. But here's something that you need to know. It's important to know, is that Biden has done things for veterans. Now, you can take a look at the Minesweeper vehicles that he pushed through. I believe it's the MRAP during the Gulf War and during Afghanistan, and you got to give him credit for that. But after that, over his 47 years, he really hasn't done much for veterans, but he did pass 4 important bills for veterans when he first got into office. The S-796 Protecting Moms Who Served Act of 2021, it addresses the maternal health care for veterans. Important. The S-894 bill, Hire Veteran Health Heroes Act of 2021, creates a program to recruit separating Department of Defense medical personnel for VA positions. Bureaucratic crap. 1031 is designed to launch a study of race and ethnicity disparities when it comes to the VA benefits and disability ratings. Extremely important. What they found is that people of color were receiving less disability, and also the problem with that is it's based upon their job rating. And overall, those disability ratings were the same as far as the percentage, but overall pay for higher responsibility, say a nuke tech versus somebody who sweeps decks, is going to be different. The amount of pay for hazardous pay, jump pay, dive pay, all of these things are considered. And when you look at the ethnicity disparities in the military and the people who work in those jobs, you're going to see a dollar amount disparity upon their severance. But it still needs to be looked into. S-1095, Tuition Fairness of Survivors Act, requires public colleges and universities that receive the GI Bill benefits to provide in-state tuition rates for students using the Survivors Independence Education Assistance Program. Probably one of the best and most important out of the 4. So you got to give Biden credit for those 4. But when we're sitting here talking about bureaucracy in the Veterans Association and the Veterans Affairs, this is the problem with the VA. The VA is like any other government bureaucracy. They may be responsible for doing something good, but that doesn't mean that they don't do it poorly. Let's take a look at Child Protective Services. We all agree that children should be taken care of, but the overarching and overreaching power that the CPS has over due process is ridiculous. They can go into any home, seize children for any reason they want, and we understand that that's important for the most outlying cases that are the most severe. But when it is just parents who decide to discipline their child, or a child that makes an accusation because they're upset they got their Nintendo taken away, CPS coming in with the strong thumb and strong arm of the law isn't necessarily what it's all about. You can look at other programs. Look at the teachers' unions. Once again, we care about kids, we care about teachers, but the way that they hold indoctrination and hold funding away from teachers, the way that they hold them all accountable to one thought process, and that if you resist, you're ostracized from the union. Once again, bureaucracy at work. If we take a look at what Donald Trump did, now this may be a little long in the tooth, but it's very important to understand, is that when they say Republicans don't do anything for vets, there's 2 major issues that Republicans have had issue with. One is this bill for veteran expansion of their budget, which they have to answer for. They have to explain why they want this 22% increase and why they are trending to $500 million, $500 billion for an overall budget, when that's going to eclipse, 250 billion shy of our defense budget. It seems a little wonky. And the second thing is obviously the Burn Pit Act, because of the legislation that was putting in there for appropriation and how they would distribute the money, and how some of these archaic rules inside this bill would allow them to rob Peter to pay Paul. But here's what they did. And this is Donald Trump and Republicans from 2016 to 2020. And some of these actually transition into the 2021 and 2022 year. Signed and implemented the VA Mission Act, which made permanent veterans' choice, revolutionized the VA community care system, and delivered quality care closer to home for veterans. The number of veterans who say they trust VA service has increased 19% to a record 91% all-time high during that time. Offered same-day emergency mental health care at every VA medical facility, and secured $9.5 billion for mental health services in 2020. Signed the VA Choice and Quality Employment Act of 2017, which ensured that veterans could continue to see the doctor of their choice and wouldn't have to wait for care, which means they could go to a family practitioner down the street versus waiting in line at the VA for 3 hours, is what I went through when the closest one to me was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. During the Trump administration, millions of veterans have been able to choose a private doctor in their communities. Expanded veterans' ability to access telehealth services, doctor on demand, including anywhere to anywhere. VA healthcare initiatives leading to a 1,000% increase in usage during COVID-19. Signed the Veterans Affairs Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act and removed thousands of VA workers who failed to give the vets the care they so richly deserved. Signed the Veterans Appeals Improvement and Modernization Act of 2017 and improved the efficiency of the VA, setting record number of appeal decisions, including mine, which I only got, my first rating was 80%, and then because I took care of my body, went through some surgeries, and got into a higher level, it was reduced to 10%. And I was fine with that. However, there were certain things that I could not qualify for when it came to my tax deduction status on my home. And I went back to the VA, I fought it, and I got the rating that would allow me to qualify. Modernized medical records to begin a seamless transition from the Department of Defense to the VA. Launched a new tool that provided veterans with online access to average wait times and quality of care data. Promised White House VA hotline has fielded hundreds of thousands of calls. Now it's in the millions. Formed the Prevents Task Force to fight the tragedy of veteran suicide. Signed and implemented the Forever GI Bill, allowing veterans to use their benefits to get an education at any point in their lives. Eliminated every penny of federal student loan debt owed by American veterans who were completely and permanently disabled. Compared to 2009, 49% fewer veterans experienced homelessness nationwide during 2019. Signed and implemented the Haven Act to ensure that veterans who have declared bankruptcy don't lose their disability payments. Helped hundreds of thousands of military service members make the transition from the military to the civilian workforce and develop programs to support the employment of military spouses. Placed nearly 40,000 homeless veterans into employment through the Homeless Veteran Reintegration Program. Placed over 600,000 veterans into employment through American Job Center Services. Enrolled 500,000 transitioning service members in over 20,000 Department of Labor employment workshops. Signed an executive order to help veteran transition seamlessly in the United States Merchant Marines. It comes down to this. Republicans, and especially Donald Trump, have done yeoman's work when it comes to veterans. They are single-handedly the most important thing to Republicans. And just because Democrats disagree with Republicans pushing back on fiscal spending, it doesn't mean we don't want the money for veterans. It means we want the money to go specifically to veterans. If we can spend $150 billion on Ukraine, we can ensure that the money that we set aside for veterans in the VA only go to veterans and only go to the VA. This isn't a Planned Parenthood. This isn't the NEA. This isn't a slush fund for Democrats to go ahead and play on the heartstrings of tax-paying Americans and then go ahead behind closed doors and spend it wherever the hell they want. I rank them an F on this. A 22% increase in the VA. It sounds good. It pulls at the heartstrings. It makes you as an American want to stand up and go red, white, and blue. But unfortunately, there is no accountability for where that money's going. That is why Republicans are pushing back. And the next time that you believe a Democrat, do the research yourself, think for yourself, and don't listen to some guy on the internet unless it's me. Folks, thanks for watching the Don't Unfriend Me Show. I will be back tonight at 8 o'clock with my wife and Leroy and Amy. We will be doing a live show. Thank you for joining me in the beautiful state of Virginia. It's a little windy. I hope the wind mic did its job. And I will see you tonight. God bless. Oh, stop by the Don't Unfriend Me store. Get yourself a cool hat. TheDumbShow.com. See you tonight.